Okay, are we okay to start, Deb?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Debbie, was there anything you wanted to provide as updates, any administrative things you wanted to chat about?
No, once we get through the webinar at the end, we'll address any project specific things with the participants at that time.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Well, this is our fourth session for Rick and Raul, we should tell you. It's our fourth webinar. This is only the second time where we've had two speakers at one time, but in talking with you both a couple weeks ago and reading through the question set, it just seems to me this is such a natural combination of minds, and I think it's going to be a very interesting and enlightening talk. So just by way of brief background for the two of you, what we've been doing in each of these talks is understanding the your kind of research and experience background, and we're always keeping a lens toward the applications for our faculty members and our students. So we're looking at ways to stimulate their idea process, their thought process about how to build these assignments. The end of this project, we hope to produce 25 or more assignments. These assignments are co-created with a faculty member and a student, and we're thinking creatively about how that might look. It may look different from faculty member to faculty member or to project. And so these talks are really about seeding ideas, getting people kind of thinking about where to look for opportunities. And your domain, if I might, the sort of medical technology field is pretty ripe with opportunities in from 2 points, as I was kind of thinking about the structure of this. The first point is simply the what's available. You know, what are people using? How's it impacting the user, the end user today? What kind of technologies are you excited about, and so forth. The second one then is a little bit more around the idea of the disparities, which we've had from the very beginning of, you know, technology access and what that means for people, let's just say in a community as an example, whether it's broadband access or, you know, access to a terminal at a library, you know, whatever it might be. How do we think about that and address that? And more importantly, are things like that indicators of health inequities in those communities? And that's what we're going to try to tease apart a little bit today. So my guests for our talk today are Raul Rayo and Rick Hall. I'm going to try to get most of this right, and I'm going to ask you gentlemen to correct me on anything I might be wrong about. Raul is the founder and CEO of Desert Platforms, which is a med tech system. He's been in the med tech leadership role for about 18 years. So he's got a lot of experience, and he's doing some really creative things, and he's going to unpack a little bit of that for us in a bit. Rick is a professor and director at Colorado Christian University. He also has a background in health innovation and technology, and with an entrepreneurial twist. And as I was reading a little bit more up on you, Rick, I remembered then the nutrition angle that you have. So you bring a kind of a varied background to the table, which is really pretty cool. You're also, I think, are you still a managing partner for the Mayo Clinic? Yes?
Yeah, I'm
And
still there. Yep.
Okay, terrific. So did I get anything wrong about those descriptions? Raul, maybe I'll start with you. Does that pretty much capture?
It does, yeah. No, I appreciate that background. That was great.
Okay, and then you're gonna help us understand more about what you do.
Certainly.
Rick, how about you? Anything I missed on you, or is that pretty good?
That's a pretty good start. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, terrific. So here's where I'd kind of like to start with both of you, and I think the way I'd like to do this today a little differently than how we did our previous when I had the two speakers. They spoke one after the next concurrently. And I'm going to ask if you two could each address the question, because I think you come at it from a slightly different perspective. But Rick, maybe we'll start with you. How did you wind up where you are in the field, studying what you're studying, research, practicing, and so forth? Walk us through it. And the thing I'm always interested in when I speak to experts such as you is the why.
Mhm.
Why did you pick this path? What was it about it that drew you to this particular domain?
Well, I've always been a little bit of I've always been an entrepreneur. So my entire life I've started small companies and worked with small companies. And my initial intent in education was to go into business. And so I started in a business school and took a nutrition class, and it changed my life. So
Mm,
that's my why is personally, I've realized that a lot of, on a personal level, a lot of our health outcomes are dependent on our behavior and our lifestyle. And so
mm,
I started eating healthier, started exercising, and I just fell in love with the field. So got really started in the nutrition field, but on the same token, continued to be an entrepreneur on the side. And it led to, I was in the school lunch program. I worked in the Peoria School District and the Ball School District and eventually the Arizona Department of Education. And after I finished my master's degree, I was asked to consider a role teaching at Arizona State University, where I worked for the next 20 years.
mm,
Got my PhD in child nutrition from Iowa State University.
mm,
And so the field of nutrition was just really my passion. But I was still an entrepreneur on the side. And ASU, if you're not familiar, ASU is very entrepreneurial school, and they encourage entrepreneurship and empower students and faculty members to be entrepreneurs. So I kind of had these separate worlds of my health, nutrition, teaching field, and then this entrepreneurial world where I lived and did things on the side and started businesses and things like that. And then when President Crow came and kind of created this entrepreneurial university, I decided to pitch
mm,
and develop courses for students in entrepreneurship. And
mm.
so I got to blend those two worlds and help students create solutions, health related solutions to real world problems. And so 22 years at ASU, was able
Wow.
to develop a health entrepreneur accelerator lab at the downtown campus, helping students, faculty, and staff members come up with health related solutions to real world problems. And then for the last 7 years, I've been the managing director for the Mayo Clinic and Arizona State University MedTech Accelerator. In fact, I happen to be sitting in an ASU building on the Mayo Clinic campus right now because our next cohort is next month in March. We bring in companies from all over the world who have medical technology products that are trying to get to market. And every March, we bring in these companies and try to help them accelerate their pathway to market.
So it sounds like if I can, your sort of the context of your work has always been in health and nutrition. That's been versus say agriculture or engineering or something else.
On a personal level, more in nutrition, but the companies I help are agnostic to what type of health issue that they're dealing with. So I work with companies that are in telemedicine and virtual reality, and very few are related to nutrition. So personally, my background's in nutrition, but now I pretty much work with medical technology companies in all kinds of areas, whether it be related to heart disease or bone health, or it doesn't really matter what it is. If it's an interesting and novel idea, then we're looking at figuring out a way to try to help them.
Interesting. Okay. Great background. Wow. You got a lot of stuff going on, and somewhere you find time to sleep a little bit. Anyways, I hope. Just sounds like you're got a busy plate there. Raul, can you share with us a little bit of your desert platforms and how you came to be there?
Yeah, I mean, so interesting. Rick has a business background similar to myself. I started college in the business school at Red McComb School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin. And I was there for 1 year before I decided, hey, I want to switch into STEM. And the way I came to that conclusion was really looking at some of the open houses that the engineering school and things were doing. Then I also went to the bookstore and just looked through the collections of books that are grouped by major and was able to read through the ones that were related to mechanical engineering and liked those. So I switched, dropped out of business school and enrolled in the engineering school. Um, and shortly after school, at that time they had programs that were just coming out for biomedical engineering, but they weren't ABET accredited, and there were still marks around what is the curriculum around those things. So I stayed in mechanical engineering and really though tried to get some internships. So my first internship that I did was second internship, but related to medical technologies, was at a company called Micromed Technologies, which was related out of DeBakey, Dr. DeBakey, and some of the work he was doing out of Houston for ventricular assist device. The first left ventricular assist device was the technology that I worked on then early. And that really got me excited about medical technologies and what you could do. And I think part of it was that there was the problems were difficult. Blood, for example, is a non-Newtonian fluid. And the benefit to mankind was clearly there, that, the work that I could do could really help people, specifically in patient outcomes.
Were
So
you, excuse me,
Sure.
were you at the nuts and bolts level on engineering products? And
Yeah, I mean, when I was an intern, I started looking at performance parameters around impeller designs for those blood pumps.
Hmm.
So depending and looking at things like blood hemolysis, battery draw, that was extremely important. This was probably in 2002, 2003. Batteries did not have the capabilities that they do today. So by doing the design work, we could influence how well these products worked, both from the patient outcome and then also the user needs associated with it. I need this battery to last a long time before I need to charge it again, right? So um, that was definitely some early experiences that were really exciting to me. After that, I went to Southwest Research Institute, which was in San Antonio, Texas, and worked there in their research and development on a host of different medical technologies. So it was consulting, and clients would come to us with a new idea. Maybe it would be a wound vac technology or ankle fixation device, and I would do the CAD design and then also the bill of materials and put together some of these early prototypes and then have those and try those with the clients, see if they were working the way they were supposed to. I really had this desire at that point to get a little bit more experience with manufacturing. So every time we'd have these new products we'd make, we would give it to our clients, and it'd be like giving away your baby, is the way it felt like to me. And so I wanted to get more experience, and that's when I moved to Arizona and started working at W.L. Gore and Associates, that were mainly in the Flagstaff locations, but they were looking at expanding into the Phoenix location.
Hmm.
And so I helped them with a lot of manufacturing process, and transferring equipment and doing validation tests and getting that up and running. So it gave me a lot of good experience working in quality management systems around medical devices and all the steps involved with it. So it was a great experience. Then I decided that I wanted to get like Rick. I had an entrepreneurial bent when I was younger, starting small companies, lemonade stands, and tennis lessons for people and things like that. But wanted to get more involved with the startup world, and I switched to a company in Mesa called Althera Inc. that did ultrasound for medical aesthetics. Worked there for a little bit, and then switched to an even smaller startup called Verve Medical, which was a 3-person startup focused on hypertension catheters or catheters, urinary catheters for the treatment of hypertension. So you'd put this urinary
Hmm.
catheter inside the pelvis of the kidney and use it to ablate nerves. So it gave me a lot of good experiences working at both the multinational corporations and at the smaller startups in the medical world. And that's when I switched to Desert Platforms and decided to start my own firm, because I really wanted to be able to help other people bring their medical technologies to the forefront. And I saw starting my own firm as the best way to do that, to be able to set up the business structures the way I wanted to be able to really focus on the user needs and the patient outcomes and making that the forefront of any work that we did.
So Raul, so your company doesn't produce the product. You're not in the lab making new devices. You're taking a product that's been created externally, and now you're looking at how to get it into the marketplace. And Is that correct?
So we do both, actually. So on
Okay.
the one hand, we'll help with if a client comes to us and they have an idea, but they haven't yet reduced it to practice in terms of creating a prototype, we'll help them create that early prototype. And then we'll meet them where they are. Sometimes some will come to us and say, we have a manufacturing challenge. We don't know why we're getting these defects. Can you help me think through analytical hierarchy process of what might be going wrong with the product? And we'll help them through those steps. Other times it'll be, we don't have a quality management system. Do you have a way of helping us get up and running in a way that won't cost us $100,000, but might cost us $10,000? And we'll help them do that. And then what we've done internally is use the client funding that we've developed and bootstrapped to do our own internal research and development. So we have two products that we're moving forward. One is in men's health for uncircumcised men who are suffering from painful skin infections. It's a technology that can help hold back the foreskin and allow the body to heal naturally. And then another one for moms who are suffering from painful breastfeeding. We've developed a ultraviolet light system that can break down Candida albicans, which causes that painful thrush and reconnect mom to baby. So we work on these products in addition to the work that we do for clients.
Wow. Wow. Both of you are kind of like opening my mind up on the world of possibilities here. So maybe if I could go and Rick, I'll come back to you. Can you share with us what you're seeing or as some of the really exciting, compelling examples of technologies? And I'm going to stay primarily in sort of the health and wellness domain, of course, because that's the nature of our, well, I should say really in STEM broadly, but in health and wellness. And the second part of that is about the accessibility of those innovations. So as you look at how they get rolled out to populations, maybe help us understand how some of those decisions are made in terms of where they get tested or where they get applied. Let's start with the first. What kind of excites you in the field of medical technologies today? What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, it is a very exciting field to be in because I see the latest, coolest technologies all the time,
Mm,
and things that I would never think would work are happening. And so I'd say some of that's related to virtual reality, some of that's related to artificial intelligence,
mm,
um, real-time monitoring of vital signs. So, smartphone devices or apps, and digital or smart watches that people wear, or where their heart
mm,
rates and their breathing rates and their cardiovascular health is being monitored in real time.
mm.
Those are like exciting technologies, and some of the technologies that are coming out that I hear about and see pitches for, I could not have imagined myself that would work. As an example, there's a company in the Phoenix area called Mindset Medical that came through our accelerator, and they use your own camera on your computer or on your phone, and while looking at you and you're talking to the camera, like maybe it's a telemedicine appointment, maybe it's just a virtual appointment like the meeting that we're having right now, and their technology can detect your heart rate, your breathing rate, your blood pressure, and your
What?
and your oxygen levels. I know it sounds completely crazy. And honestly, if a student came to me with this idea, I would have told them, let's dial it down a little bit to something that would actually work. But it works. And they
Oh
just
my
they
word.
just got FDA approval recently on one of those 4 parameters. So those types
Oh.
of things that I see and hear and get to work with, and I know the founders of these companies, it just excites me every day. I feel like I have, one of the best jobs in the world. Um,
Wow.
so I get to see these things, and then I think, in health and wellness, besides the monitoring of vitals, which is, obviously very related. I think even in in the field of nutrition where where I came from, we're seeing the possibilities of nutrigenomics where, I think in the future people will have specific nutrition recommendations based on their body or their genetics or their
Mm,
their background, instead of these wide generic dietary recommendations that we've made for years
mm,
to like every person in America, despite the fact that we have a diverse population that
Hmm.
that probably don't all need the exact same thing. So I'm seeing as these technologies get better, that the future of healthcare is very bright in my mind. I do think, to answer the second part of your question, I think several of these technologies are still inaccessible to people in diverse communities, and where you could certainly many people have smartphones or access to smartphones, but a lot of people don't still, and there's a lot of people that live in very rural areas that don't have access to even the internet. So I think there's
Yeah.
still going to be issues of accessibility, I think, or accessibility for a lot of folks that we're trying to
Yeah.
reach.
Yeah.
But the exciting thing is that even that's improving, I think, and you're going to see over time we're going to have uh, Wi-Fi and internet availability on a more global scale. And some of the companies, like I said, that we brought in, they're from all over the world. We've had companies from Africa that are doing healthcare and trying to reach rural populations in Africa through their technologies. So the future is bright, and many of the things that I've seen and that you might be interested in are totally available on our website, the Mayo Clinic and ASU MedTech Accelerator. So the website is medtechexcel.com, and
Okay.
look on participants, and you can see, I think we probably brought in 40 or 50 companies by now. And you can look at every single one of the technologies that have come out. But there's some things that have come out that I can't even talk about yet because they're not even ready to be talked about, that I get to see on a regular basis.
So I have to ask you then, go back to that example you gave of Mindset Medical. Okay, that kind of blows my mind that they can detect and heart rate, oxygen levels, and such. Are you suggesting then with the Nutronics, the nutrient one, there'll also be devices that we might wear or think that'll be able to sense levels
No,
of?
the nutrigenomics is more DNA type of work. It's
Oh, I see.
still new technology, but yeah, I mean, the fact that we're able to map the DNA of individuals, and the fact that that field of DNA is growing so rapidly as well. I was just giving another example, but no, not there wouldn't be a camera that could necessarily do that. I will say that even like I can remember 10 years ago going into labs where they had, people would have a camera and they were trying to see if the AI could detect an apple. So they would put an apple down and see if the computer could say an apple. And we're like far beyond that now. I mean, it was like
Yeah.
it was so crazy when I saw it the first time. And now it's like computers do that all the time. It's like not even a big deal anymore. So that's the rapid growth that we're seeing in some of these areas, and how technology can play a role in our health recommendations, our food recommendations. Because you can imagine, as a I'm also a dietitian, and we're always looking at, what do people eat and how does that affect their health? Well, if you had a picture of your food, and the picture that you took with your camera or whatnot, with the technologies that are existing, could actually do a complete dietary analysis of that food, um, identify it, do an analysis of it relatively accurately, portion sizes, that kind of thing. And now with AI and generative AI, I think we're going to be able to see more rapid um, recommendations made even in the world of nutrition just based on these same technologies.
I want to come back to the comments you made about accessibility because I have a follow-up question, but I don't want to go too far down that before I hear from Raul uh, on his, I don't know, latest coolest tech. What are you seeing, hearing? Similar things or different approaches?
I mean, yeah, there's so many cool things. Recently with some clients we worked on, there was one here called NanoPin that we were working with, and they were developing in vitro diagnostic blood draw for tuberculosis. So previously, tuberculosis was always investigated via sputum samples and or culture. And for some populations that have comorbidities like HIV, or pediatric populations specifically as well, they don't have the sputum in the lungs to be able to accurately test. So having a reliable blood draw that you could quickly use is really big. And then when you look at also where the world is now, where there are such shifts of immigration, we see that coming into our country, but we see it also throughout Europe and different places. Having a screening way to make sure that from an epidemiology standpoint, and having a blood draw that can do a quick screen is huge to make sure that new diseases aren't coming into the general population. So those are some technologies. There's another company that I'm working with locally called Senior Rising Homes. It's
Mm.
interesting because they relate from a socioeconomic standpoint as well. The tuberculosis technologies, obviously, tuberculosis is not a big issue in the United States, but it is extremely big in places like Asia where there are huge populations, China, India, and where there are big health disparities as well based on economics. But locally here in Glendale, Arizona, we're working with a facility that has aging population, so an elder facility where everyone's is 62 or older, and they are subsidized through the Housing and Urban Development, the HUD. And so typically, a lot of these people would be in an apartment that maybe costs $800 a month, and instead they're spending $200 a month, and the rest is coming from the federal government.
Mhm.
Um, and so we're looking at putting technologies in that can help them stay independent as long as possible. Because
Mhm.
if they lose their independence, they lose their health, and which creates negative effects for them and their life. But they also have to move out of the facility and go into
Sure.
something with memory care or skilled nursing
Sure.
or other things. So there are some technologies we've looked at, like using radar, for example, where the radar system can detect motion. It can detect some of the health metrics that Dr. Hall was talking about,
Mm.
such as breathing rate, respiration. So you can look at and see with a technology like that how frequently somebody is getting out of bed. And if you know that they're getting out of bed 6 times in the middle of the night, you and I, over time, maybe that's not a big deal. But to a medical professional, they may look at that and say, "You're getting up 6 times for frequent urination. We
Yeah.
can that." And if you can address that through early intervention, you could figure out that, hey, this is a person that is pre-diabetic, or and maybe put something in place that would stop them from becoming full-blown diabetic, right?
Sure.
And those are the types of things that we're really interested in. Also, preventing falls is a big technology. I think there was a
Mhm.
company that came through the ASU Mayo, My Health, that is able to detect gait motion and determine if a resident is more likely to fall or not. Some of these radar technologies I was talking about can look at the speed that a older adult is moving. So if last week they were moving at 4 feet per second through their apartment, and this week they're moving at 2 feet per second, it may suggest, that, hey, maybe there should be an intervention here. And that's where pairing some of these technologies with telemedicine is really big. So there are telemedicine. We've had this, and even part of probably our health insurances, we have access to some sort of telemedicine plan. But having it where you're able to, where the technology suggests for you, versus you having to go and make the suggestion yourself. I think maybe for the mainstream, that makes sense. For people that have achieved like ourselves, it makes sense that if I notice something, I'm going to go and take the
Mm.
proper proactive steps. For people who have not had that benefit, having a technology that could step up and say, hey, it may be time for you to have a health appointment, that's a big difference for them. Because also it's coming from a robot or a technology, it's not coming from a person, and there's no baggage associated with that. I know when I look at my parents, I can tell them something and they won't listen to me. But if
Mm.
an app tells them, they're doing it the next day, and I'm like, I just told you that, right? And they won't listen to me though. Um,
Actually, Raul, I thought you were going to say it could also be the opposite, though. It's this robot telling me, and therefore I'm not going to listen to it. I mean, that kind of can play both ways, I would bet.
It's true. And we've seen that where people will say, over my dead body, I'm going to accept that technology into my apartment. I don't
Yeah.
need any of that. And then we'll see sometimes after 2 weeks when they're at the lunchroom or in the hallways and they hear from other residents that have tried it, they're like, hey, actually, can I get that now? And we just pretend like we didn't remember what they told us 2 weeks ago, right? So we say, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, here it is.
Sure. That's interesting. Both of you are working with some really, really cool technologies. And I want to go back to a point Rick was making about accessibility of this emerging technology and this healthcare systems to underserved or disadvantaged populations. And it got me thinking about kind of a bell curve. I'm guessing, or not even the bell curve, or maybe, yeah, the bell curve skewed one way. You may have a population who has access to it, but then there's a real long tail of folks who don't. But over time, those those technologies could find their way into, for example, the cost of cell phones and such comes down to where it becomes a reasonable option. It may not be the latest greatest, but it'll begin to serve the needs for those individuals. I know that can be a long time coming, but do you both see that sort of phenomena happening?
Yeah, I do. You've already seen, I mean, that in many populations, and there's a lot of populations that do have access to these technologies that are sometimes surprising. But I think you're right. It's still, we still have a long way to go. I mean, there's even like places, even in Arizona that are very rural. I mean, you would get into some of these areas in northern Arizona, you might think you're in a third world nation. I mean, it's just, what you will see over time is not only the accessibility of the cell phones become better, but even the internet and the ability for, you have technology, you have solar, you have so many possibilities, I think, in the future that's going to, these prices, the costs will be driven down over time. I'm also worried about in some of these rural areas, transportation issues as well. So, and that's one of those things that, telemedicine can help address, but still, there's still going to be a need to see people in person. And sometimes there's other issues outside of, cell phone access that I think are still going to be problematic for many years to come.
Yeah, yeah. Raul, any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for technology implementations, it can be easy if there's wealth and if it goes into channels that already exist. I think for some people, even if you get the cost down, they still may not adopt it because it's just a channel that's not accessible to them. So for example, at the senior communities, we've offered some technologies for free and people still don't use them. So it's not really money that's a driver. It's just they're not used to it. So one, for example, is teledentistry, where you can take an iPad and put it to the teeth and take some pictures, and that can go back to a dentist who can make an assessment. You could see them in real time. You could do many things, which is great for rural populations or populations that don't have access to quality dental care. But the problem is that you haven't had quality dental care since you were 2 years old. There's no concept of going to the dentist every 6 months. So trying to educate and get that in place, it doesn't matter that I give you a dentist and I give you toothbrushes and I give you stuff. That concept doesn't exist, right? So there is a lot from a psychological standpoint with different populations that has to be addressed for health to truly be adopted. Rick probably sees with nutrition, I would imagine, where certain populations get it and they'll follow a nutrition plan, a dietary plan, and others just won't, either because even if they had access to proper foods, we call it food desert sometimes, where there's not access to a proper grocery store. And downtown Phoenix was one for a long time. They've recently added a Fry's grocery store across from the baseball stadium. But until then, there was no grocery stores downtown to get vegetables and things like that. So there can be cultures and psychologies that go into creating proper channels for people to adopt the technologies. And I think anything that STEM education does, that would be really important to look at that for people to adopt.
You hit on a really important point that I was going to bring up, Raul, and that had to do with, although you've expanded it, I was thinking of cultural barriers potentially to the adaptation or adoption of some of these technologies. But you also are kind of pointing to age barriers, right? Like I never experienced quality dental care. So it's kind of a foreign concept to me now that I'm 50, 60, whatever, and I've got to be starting to worry about these things because it's having an impact.
Mhm.
Both of those, well, there's probably there's economic barriers as well, I'm sure, that prevent these things from being implemented in that way, which is really kind of interesting. Um, Rick, I think on your bio you had some issues down as well about oh, what's the term I'm looking for? Regulations, regulatory policy, compliance, and so forth. I didn't know if that had a place here in this discussion or not. Maybe you can help me understand that.
Sure. Well, and Raul works a lot with, trying to get some of these companies FDA regulated as well. But a lot of the cool technologies that I see on a regular basis um, have a 10-year, sometimes longer runway to even get seen by patients. I remember the first time that I went to a health technology conference and I saw a really cool product. I can't even remember what it was, but I was talking to the founder of it and I said, well, how come I don't see these in the hospitals? How come I don't see? He said, oh, we're not in the United States. We're in Australia and England. And I said, why aren't you in the United States? He said, because the FDA. It just takes too long. And we work with companies. The whole reason we do the MedTech Accelerator is to help speed up the pathway to market, because some of these technologies are incredible, but you have still to go through the process of getting approved. And so sometimes especially if it goes into the body, that increases the length of time. You have to do clinical trials and studies, and of course that's a good thing. We want products to be safe before we start using them, but it takes a while to get that done. The other thing you have to think about with new technologies is also the cost. Yes, over time, our hope is that all new technologies reduce healthcare costs, reduce healthcare errors, medical errors, improve accessibility. We want all that to happen. But even for a lot of these products to come out, there has to be some type of reimbursement strategy or some type of way for the company to make money in order to do what they do. Because you might think, well, an app doesn't cost that much, but an app with thousands and thousands and thousands of users and all of the data that comes along with that has to have some type of cloud-based data system, that's stored in. So there's costs associated with these. And so part of what we help them do not only is regulation, issues, but also dealing with reimbursement strategies and bringing in insurance providers and Medicare, and how do you get these products covered or the services covered, so that there has to be some type of revenue that goes to a company in order to keep the product working. And so those are just two of the many things that founders have to do to come up with in order to get a product to market. And so, yeah, sometimes these things are easier in other places, than they are here. Sometimes it's easier here if it's like an app versus something that goes into the body, a digital app. So all of that. Go ahead, Ed.
It's really interesting the way you're describing that process. I can imagine, and we're all familiar with pharmaceuticals and the claim from the pharmaceuticals that it cost us, $10 million to develop this new drug, whatever it might be, and we need to figure out a price model that can recoup that investment in research. The end user says, oh no, it can't be that much, it's just a little pill, like you can't be charging me the amount. So that's a dicey relationship to have to sort of manage, because we want to get uh, these methods, these systems, these tools, as well as the medications into the hands of the end user. And I think both what you're saying and what Raul was commenting on, for example, the devices that could gauge a person's movements and look at the gait and has that changed over time, or look at the frequency of getting up at night and so forth. Ultimately, those things should lead to two things. They should lead to better health for the individual, but also less medical costs if you can address it, Raul, right? In the sooner, and say maybe there's an infection going on before it turns into something dramatic that has to be hospitalized to respond to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're hitting at the kind of this Venn diagram that it has to be a win-win for all these different players and stakeholders in the system. So if it can, technologies that get adopted will lower costs for insurance. They will make better outpatient outcomes, and they'll somehow disrupt what has occurred, but without making sure that everybody is better off as a result of it. It's easier for doctors, a faster procedure for them to perform, and they get still a good amount of reimbursement for each procedure that they go through. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Are you seeing, Rick, on your end, and Raul, maybe are you seeing a shorter time ramp, if you will, or with your systems and your know-how, are you able to reduce that time to market
Well,
some? You
that's our
probably can't
goal.
jump over the hurdle. You can't jump over the federal hurdle. I mean, there's a system in place for a reason, right?
Mhm.
But there's other parts of it that you can shorten.
Well, that's what the goal of what we do. We're an accelerator, and we accelerate that pathway. And partly is introducing founders to the right people quickly, because
Mm.
for any product to make it, or any new service to make it, you're going to have to meet the right stakeholders, and that on your own, entrepreneurship can be a lonely journey sometimes, and you might be knocking on doors and making phone calls for years to get to the right people that you're trying to get help from before you even get to a clinical trial. And so, yeah, that's absolutely our goal, is to speed up that. And so we're very selective the companies we bring in, because we want to make sure that we think it's first of all, the founders have to be coachable, people that we believe will listen to advice, and that seek out ways of improving what they're doing. Um, maybe companies who are looking for maybe co-development opportunities, because we're going to have, by the way, we have students, we have ASU students who will come along with these companies and be interns for them. And so we're going to give them students, we're going to give them access to researchers and labs and clinical research management protocols. And then we're going to introduce them to the right doctors at Mayo Clinic, and maybe even doctors in the community that are experts in what they're doing, so that we can, on our part, speed it up. I will say, I think the FDA, it has improved over time. It's still got a long way to go. It's a federal organization, takes a while, but I think just technology in general is helping, and education on how to get to your regulatory pathway over time, over the last 20, 30 years, has improved, and I think it'll continue to improve. But again, we like that it's hard. We want we want to make sure
Yeah,
the products
you
are
want the
safe.
rigor.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some good examples of bad actors, and I'm wondering if you've run into them as well. So I'm thinking about the most famous one, probably everybody knows of, is Elizabeth Thuros.
Theranos, yeah.
Yeah, Theranos. Do you see other? I mean, what we call them, they're just bad actors. They're acting for purposes other than somebody they're acting for self-interest strictly. Do you run into that?
I haven't, but there have been many companies that have come in, and that I have questioned whether they're a new Theranos. I'm like, there's no ways that actually work. Like,
Well, when you told the one about judging the oxygen and breathing, that's the first example I thought was, wait a minute,
yeah,
could that be real?
I have wait a minute reactions all the time. I'm like, show me how this works, and they show, and it works, and I'm
Wow.
just really surprised. And yeah, I mean, there's certainly people out there that are, um, I think, dreamers, and are trying to do things that probably aren't going to work, or maybe they're trying to reach out a little bit further than what their technology can actually do. But the companies that I've been around, maybe Raul's been different, but for me, we surround ourselves with, a lot of times they say investors invest in people, not products. And I think that's very true. We're looking for not just good products and services and interesting technology. We're looking for good founders. And so we do a pretty good job of vetting those out before we even start working with them.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before, but that's a really wise statement. We're looking for the right people. If they have the right product, or maybe close to the right product, we can work with them. Raul, have you had those kind of experiences of having to judge, or do you have that, wait a minute?
I mean, definitely with new technologies that are impressive, it's like, well, how this going to happen, right? And how do we make it happen? I mean, I think that there are some things that you can do to shorten the timeline. On our side, there are barriers to a startup company, like Rick was saying, was what how do you make the connections, but also the funding that is required from the beginning. So we'll help customers with maybe we don't need a full quality system to start. Let's just use a portion of it, your design controls piece and your documentation piece. And let's start with that until you can prove out that and you have a return on investment. Because the first 100 grand of any venture, I think, needs to go to proving that there is a return on investment for whomever else is going to come in and invest in what you're doing. And then I think also with the FDA, they've made strides with the breakthrough designations program, where if you can get a breakthrough designation, you can speed up both review process and communications with the FDA. The FDA is staffed with some amazing people, some brilliant people that are there, and they're experts in the field of what that technology is that the people are working on in the industry. So it can really be a good symbiotic relationship when it works correctly. In the past, there were times where there'd be huge lag times and nobody would know what would happen. You turn in an application, it's a black hole. They've changed their systems where now you can see in real time what's happening with your application, where the process is, and an estimate of when the next touch point will be. So luckily, I haven't worked with too many companies that are purposely trying to do something. Usually what I find is that the companies are off target on their minimum viable product and who they're going to serve. So it takes them iterations to figure out that. And so we really stress to them, let's try to do the ethnographic research or the user needs gathering way up front. If we do human factors research up front and create a quick prototype using 3D printing or other quick prototyping methods, let's put that in the hands of a potential user and let them tell us that this isn't what I was thinking. It was this instead. So they don't go down the wrong path.
I think you two.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say something that Raul brought up that we haven't really talked much about yet is the money part of this, just the startup money. We talked about reimbursement strategies and how it's going to be paid for in the long term. But I have not worked with bad actors who are intentionally doing things badly, but I have worked with several startups that have failed. And that's part of what, in the entrepreneurial world, we're kind of used to that. Mm-hmm. And some of them have raised several $1 million and still failed. So, and it doesn't, not necessarily because it's a bad product, it might be that it was the wrong product, wrong time. Maybe somebody else got there faster. Maybe they ran out of money, but the financial part of this is real. And there's, like he said, $100,000 might just get you a minimally viable product and some testing to validate that it's actually possible and it's working. Then you got to really go out and get money. And for some startups, it's a couple $1 million to start. For some, it's 10 million. Some it's more than that. And so we've worked with a lot of companies that have just ran out of money. And and some of these products do cost a lot to get off the ground.
Yeah. What I was going to say earlier is that you two are positioned in a really interesting point in this process. I mean, you're both bringing to the table this aggregated experience of how to move, assessing the viability of the product, developing the business plan, looking at the rampway, and helping to guide these innovations through the system. It's got to be fascinating work, and both of you. I'm sure there's no shortage of work. Mm-hmm. So let me end with this question, because this is a big one that's been floating around in my head. As these new tools, systems, even medications continue to evolve, and that ramp up time, let's say, gets faster and faster, what can we do as educators to help our students recognize where and how those tools and systems and solutions get implemented? So, the digital divide argument of the gap between those who have access to the broadband in the iPhones and such, and those who don't. This is my question for you, does it worry you, or do you think about how you bridge some of that? Do you see that gap just increasing over time or staying the same? I'm not sure I'm being real concise with my question, but I'm looking at the issue of disparity.
Mhm.
And the further growth and development of these amazing technologies, just mind-blowing things, do they increase and serve one population and not the other?
That, well, I would think that that's sometimes the case, but I would say that the companies that we're looking for and that we're trying to accelerate are companies that improve access to healthcare. And that's one of the primary markers that we're looking for. So we want to look for products that reduce costs, make things more efficient, reduce errors. I think there's one company that we worked with that was like a robotic surgery type of company, but most of the companies that we work with are not like surgical tools. Now, there's certainly great surgical tools being developed. Most of what things we work with are improving access to healthcare, and so that's one of our primary goals. And you're going to see both. I think you're going to see some products that the average person will never see, and probably will never have access to. But you're going to see a lot of other products that come out that kind of level the playing field and make it accessible to more people. I mean, just the fact that we even have telemedicine is a major breakthrough. I mean, we've had it available to us for many years, but now, COVID kind of sped up the use of it. And, people can talk to or see a doctor remotely and not have to drive, because like transportation is a real issue, in some places, in the urban areas, you at least have public transportation, but in many places you don't, and there's not public transportation in Northern Arizona in the tribal areas. So the fact that these technologies are available and used and doesn't require a whole lot of expertise from the user standpoint, I think we're seeing a lot of these disparities and access to healthcare is going to improve over time, and already is.
Yeah, interesting. Raul, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree with Rick. I think that access to healthcare will improve. I think it can't improve alone though, because as I was mentioning, like for in Glendale, the seniors and the older adults that are there, we provided telemedicine and all these free services and being able to access on their phones, et cetera. But what we did was pair it with a company called the Smarter Service, who provides a tech who comes every Wednesday and is able to provide like a geek squad or a desk where people can walk up and ask questions and say, hey, my phone's not working right, or can you help me with this email or whatever it might be. So we noticed that there was a big gap, again, in the education. So I think that was big and then the other thing we realized too is that the people that are using the service are really only women. So even though it's a 50-50 community, the men aren't coming, and there could be some things related to that. The same reason men don't stop and ask for directions, maybe, right? Is that
Yeah.
it could be something there. But we also realize that people who have come from places where historically their entire lives they have gotten the short end of the stick, they may not take the steps that you and I would take to go find somebody, seek out help, and solve their problem. They will just sit with their problem, even though all the solutions are right around them, because they don't want to take those steps. So what we've realized is that having that tech get up from the desk and walk around the facility and interact with people and talk with them or knock on doors, that then they'll find somebody that has a tech support issue and they're able to provide that tech support. So there's definitely a lot of psychology, I think, that goes into it, and a lot of historical culture issues that can come up for certain populations. Dr. Hall was talking about Native American populations who possibly have had tests done on them, or other minority groups that have had tests and things done. So when you say, hey, go talk to this doctor over here who's in a similar white coat where they know historically this is what happened to my grandmother, it's just a hard sell. So I think that the people that are living the problems, they have a solution to the problem. They know a cultural context or a historical context that will actually bring them to it. But it may not be that this is the app. It could be an app, but you need to create the tools, and STEM needs to create the tools so that those people can help guide what the solution is. So I think it's less about, I created this and I'm going to force it down to you, and more of, let's work together to figure out what is the right solution if you really want to find the disparities in health and the barriers that are there. And then I think everybody wins, because again, it is finding that win-win. I think it's there, but it's just done in a different lens.
You know, you both hit on something that I think is really, really important. And you know, we've mentioned that this is a STEM project. It's actually a STEAM project. So it's open to the humanities and to the psychology and social aspects of it. And I think, Raul, what you're just talking about there is the critical dimension of a human being. You know, a real live person who reaches out and says, you know, is your technology working? Is there anything I can be helping you with?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than pushing a technology solution and then kind of wondering, geez, why isn't anyone using this?
Right.
Um, and as our faculty members and teacher teams start to look at their own communities, maybe these are some of the things that they could be assessing. You know, what are the cultural barriers to the acceptance of technologies? You raised the historical um, damage that's been done, the broken trust that's been done over the years, and that's not a small thing.
Mhm.
And you know, as STEM educators, as STEAM educators, is what can we do to help bridge some of those gaps as well? Well, I got to tell you, this has been really informative, and I'm going to take away a couple ideas of my own here. The one Rick you mentioned is, and I forget how you phrased it, but something in the fact where you open your eyes and go, "Hey, how'd you do that?" You know, that's I think that's a phenomena that we're experiencing in our lives more and more. It is truly unbelievable what the technology can do for us today in heart, in cancer research. I mean, all of those fields. So the opportunities are pretty wide open. Any last thoughts for us, Rick or Raul, as we wrap up?
No, I mean, one thing that we didn't really talk too much about was just the field of data and informatics. But I think you're going to see those
Good point.
technologies improve as well. And there's a guy, medical doctor here at Mayo Clinic that's doing specifically work on that. And as patients come in and you collect data on them, whether it's just heart rate and breathing rates and blood draws and all these other things, and yet they're coming in for like a urinary tract infection, and now you can, using data, go, you know what, you might have a heart disease in the next 5 years, and
Yeah.
we think you should do things to prevent that. I think we're going to see more in the data area as well, of
Yeah.
just prediction of
Yes.
potential health issues related to the data that's available. And there's a lot of data on every single one of us just from using technology on a regular basis.
Sure.
But no,
Yeah.
I'm excited for the work you guys are doing. I know Raul and I both work with students on a regular basis. We love students. Students are smarter than we know, and are always thinking outside the box because they don't even know there's a box. And there's a lot of boxes in healthcare, but I love working with students, and so I applaud the efforts that you guys are doing in this work, in this area.
Well, we'll certainly keep you, and Raul will give you a second here, but we'll certainly keep you updated on the outcomes.
Great.
Would love for you to be able to glance down through the assignments and provide any input. Raul, any final thoughts, perspectives?
I mean, this has been great, and I know that one of the goals is to come up with lesson assignments. Excuse me. I think you know, anything that you can do to map out some of these ecosystems would really be helpful, because then you can see where the gaps are, and you know, sometimes less is more. I think we think doing adding all these different layers to this healthcare system as we understand it will make things better. But I think if you really listen to people, sometimes they're wanting less. And if you can subtract and operate and think about that, you could figure out that, hey, maybe allopathic medicine is great in these instances, but maybe what they're asking for is actually tribal medicine here, or they're asking for naturopathic medicine or Eastern medicine or Ayurvedic or acupuncture. I mean, there's a host of different things that could be out there if you really map an ecosystem and see. I mean, sometimes I've often wondered why surgery is the first thing we go to when, you know, you've got a back pain or someone has a golf injury. I would ask them first, hey, have you gone to yoga? Do some stretching first, right? And see. But you know, that's not the way the system is set up. And sometimes people can get pushed into different areas when they really, a smaller intervention may have been better for them. So I think those would be great things to think about from a lesson perspective, and then think about the science of how you could solve those problems.
You know, on top of that, Raul, you're speaking about you know, our rush to solutions. prescriptions seem to be a big concern now. Have we over applied antibiotics? Have we over applied these medications and NSAIDs and what, to the point now that it's well harming us rather than, and was there a less harmful approach rather than to rushing to that? I really appreciate your comment there about opening our minds up to alternative solutions to things. It doesn't have to be strictly one approach. I really appreciate that.
And I think even when we think about insurance, there are some really interesting programs that have come out now for health sharing programs, where rather than go through traditional insurance, everybody pays into a community, and that community can send money out. The one that I've used in the past is called Sedera. And there are other ones that sometimes are more religiously affiliated, but that's an interesting model to supplant traditional insurance or to work in conjunction with traditional insurance. So there's a host of things that are happening and changing the landscape. I think wherever you go back to the users and the pain points. I think those things have arrived because the traditional methods maybe haven't worked for definitely where there are inequities, but even sometimes for the mainstream.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, I'm going to let you beg off because something tells me you're both very busy, and we so much appreciate your time and your thoughts on this. And as I said, we promise to keep you in the loop on as the products develop. But thank you very much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Yep.
Take care, both
Bye-bye.
of you. Thank you.
Bye.
Debbie, are you back with us?
I'm here.
Okay.